Sport had always just been sport. The game had just been the game. The look of sport had always just been the look of sport. Until it wasn't anymore. There was a moment on the timeline of modern sport when everything changed. A few talented and passionate designers were brought together with one mission: to change the look, feel, and performance of sport forever. What started as a ripple in the early 1990s has served as the catalyst for the international revolution in sports branding, uniform design, and performance innovation that continues to accelerate today. This is the origin story of Nike Team Sports, as told by the designers, creators, and innovators who made it happen. This is the Designasty.
Welcome to the Designasty. This is the unauthorized oral history of Nike Team Sports. It's called the Designasty because from 1993 to 1998, that's basically what it was. It was a dynasty of design within sport. I'm Ken Black, your host and a founding member of that original Nike team. This podcast is an excuse to talk to my former teammates about the memories, products, coaches, and teams that made that era so special. Today, I'm talking to Drake Ramberg, a 33-year Nike veteran and former colleague. We touch on each other's journeys. We talk about what Nike was like in those early 1990s in both the US and abroad. We talk about Nike's design ethos and the importance of having story buried into everything we created. And we even cover a few of our favorite projects that each of us had worked on. I hope you'll enjoy this very first episode of the Designasty. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Designasty. We're here to talk about the history of Nike uniforms, design, and teams. I'm your host, Ken Black, here with Drake Ramberg, who, by the way, I have to say, just retired after 37 years at Nike. So congrats, Drake.
Yeah, I just graduated and ready to start career 2.0 here.
Graduate off into the world. That's awesome. So for many of you out there who are asking, who are these guys and why should they be the ones talking about this stuff? Just said Drake had 37 years at Nike. I was at Nike for 25. So if you put that together, we've got 62 years of stories, teams, and a lot of other stuff we worked together on. We spent a lot of that time in parallel, not necessarily together. So I think what's going to be really cool, and I'm interested in learning a ton as we go through this podcast series, is how Nike was influencing sport and identity around the world, not just in the US. So again, for those of you listening, Drake really was lead on designing and setting up the design studio in Europe. We'll get into that in a little bit. But as he was doing that in Europe around European soccer kits, I was doing the same thing with the startup team on organized team sports in the US. And so we're going to really get to talk about those parallel paths. But even as Drake has on his Instagram handle, OG Drake, it's true OG here. So that's the fun, I think, of the conversation. I think for the purpose of the setup, too, we're going to focus, just so everybody knows, we're going to focus more around the years of 1990 to 2000, which is really when Nike entered the game, had a huge impact on sport in terms of the aesthetic of sport, signed deals with college teams, with EPL teams, with the NFL, the NBA, hockey, and beyond, even some Olympics. So that's really where we're going to spend a lot of our time talking and digging into specific projects and stories along the way.
The glory days, right?
Yeah, the glory days, which you don't know when you're in them. You don't know when you look back. Like, so how old were you in those glory days? When you were doing the Europe stuff, how old were you?
Well, I got over to Europe and I was 27, basically. Yeah. So yeah, just a young pup.
Yeah, I think I was about that same, 26, 27 when we started it. Just kids who knew how to design, trying to do cool stuff, right? Love sport. Awesome. Well, let's start kind of with something, maybe one of your favorites, and then we'll go back in time for a little bit. But when you think of the 37 years, is there a project or a team or something that stands out to you as one of your faves?
All right, we're getting right into it here.
Let's go.
God, it's so hard to pick. It's like picking your favorite child or something, right? but there's a lot of memorable ones. But yeah, I think just I always go back to my time in Europe, 6 years there from '90 to '96. It was pretty formative time for Nike in that space in the football industry. I'd started working on Dortmund and PSG and Lyon, three football teams that we had over there. But I think the most memorable was arriving at Highbury Stadium and visiting Arsenal when we signed them.
Yeah.
And we started outfitting them starting in 1994. So we were probably over there in 93, or so, a year or 18 months beforehand to get going on the project. But yeah, meeting the players, meeting the manager, and just like a kid in a candy store wandering around the stadium and the trophy cases and then going to a football match. Growing up in the U.S., we'd been to our fair share of Timbers games and, Blazers basketball games, but pretty eye-opening to see firsthand football matches over there. So those were amazing times.
Isn't that wild? It's like I remember some similar things in my story too, which is like, what the hell am I doing here? This is amazing. I think I don't belong. I'm glad to be here. I want to help, but I'm not sure that I belong here. That's fantastic. Mine, it just always comes up, and it's kind of tagged to me for a lot of reasons. This is the Denver Broncos, right? So we had signed the deal with the NFL. We got in, and then we had been dabbling in uniform and brand upgrades along the way with colleges and stuff. But it was the first time that an owner in a league just said, "Hey, Nike, have your way with us, and let's go. Let's make something really cool." And so we'll talk about that in a future episode. We can go deep on it. But just working with Pat Bowlen, who was the owner of the Broncos, and Mike Shanahan was the coach at that time. And then some athletes, really the same thing. And it was the first time also that, the first time I'd been connected to something where really the performance and function of something, which David Turner had been building what he called this Batwing jersey, which was a super innovative football jersey. So the lines and the aesthetic and the function of that thing connected with the visual aesthetic of everything else we did in that brand. Like it all came together. It was truly a dream job, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to go deeper on some of these stories because I think the viewers will enjoy hearing kind of the backstory and how we really kind of pioneered new spaces in the industry. Whether it's in global football or soccer, or in American football, college basketball. So we didn't come in and just kind of do what everybody else is doing. We took our own path. So it's going to be fun to talk about it.
Yeah, for sure. So, in order for us to get to the place where you were with Arsenal, where I was with the Broncos and a lot of other people doing a lot of other cool stuff, there was a beginning, right? So talk about, you said, I think, when were you hired, and then what was your path? What was your path to get to Europe?
Yeah, I'll do a quick overview and then we'll go deeper on another episode. But basically, I grew up in Oregon, outside of in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, near Beaverton, where Nike was headquartered at the time. And I played basketball. I always had a hoop in the driveway and playing with my brother constantly, rain or shine. And then, started playing soccer. And loved that. And I was always drawing and using markers and coloring, and had an appetite for art. But got a fine art degree from Portland State, and then got hired on as a freelancer at Nike in '86. At that time, the apparel division was just getting going, and they hired me as a graphic designer. And then about a year later, they were able to get a headcount approved so they could hire me on full time. Yeah. So, I started there in '87, working as a full-time employee in the apparel division. And then they assigned me to Nike Premier, our first soccer training collection in about '89. And
Still in the U.S.
Still in the U.S. And then finally, to get up to 1990, that was probably about '89, where Mark Parker and Angela Snow sat me in a room, I remember specifically, and I said, "Hey, what do you think about going over to Europe? We need somebody to set up a studio over there and work on global football while residing there versus trying to do it from Beaverton, Oregon, which I think that was a smart move. So,
Yeah.
yeah, basically, I went over there in 1990, and it was supposed to be a 2-year assignment, and it ended up being a 6-year
Wow.
uh, dream job. So, pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's amazing. How did you go specifically for the reason to design professional football kits? Was that the deal, or was there kind of a
Well,
broader
I think
deal? What was
that
the
was that was definitely the sharp point. We had those teams over there, PSG and Dortmund, Lyon, that needed support and a lot more focus probably than what we had. We didn't have graphic designers over there. I
hmm
think there was maybe a couple apparel designers, and we were in the infancy of setting up shop over there. So they needed somebody to go over there and kind of create a mini version of what we had at the world headquarters, a full-on design studio with dark room and ability to do film separations and Canon copiers and
Yeah,
computers. And so it was more than the job was more than just global football. It was setting up shop, setting up studio, recruiting, and bringing in new designers from Germany and Holland and France and around the
yeah,
area. And then also we were doing branded product for Europe as well. So
yeah,
there was a lot going on there,
yeah.
but yeah, I loved every minute of it.
So the kits were an important piece, but what you were like when we talk about OG, it's OG on football kits, but this was the beginning of apparel design in Europe for Nike, right? Like this is the first real moment when we actually had an organization that could make stuff in market, right?
Yeah, because what would happen is from the world headquarters in Beaverton,
Yeah,
they would create the tennis lines, the running lines, and basketball, and Air Jordan, Force Flight,
yeah,
Challenge Court Tennis, all those kind of collections. And then those would be shared out with Europe and Asia and South America. And then those regions or geographies would select, uh, styles and products from the collection that were
right.
appropriate for their region, and then they would augment that with other stuff that was maybe a little more focused and connected to their consumer. And
Yeah,
that happened a lot in footwear too, where they do special colorways and things like that. So,
yeah,
oh yeah,
yeah,
so it was a kind of a portfolio of U.S. or U.S. design stuff that was representing what Nike's brand wanted to put out into the world, and then
hmm
just supplementing that with some other stuff that was just a little more sharper focused on the European consumer.
yeah, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, so I started in '92, and that was probably would have been about when you were doing that. So you were already in Europe. I got to tell you, when I started in '92, like, eh, let's move off of team stuff for a second. Just talk about Nike design. Like what I remember coming in was like, oh my goodness, what is this? This is amazing. This is the best design world I've ever been in, right? We had design camps, all that kind of stuff. What do you remember about those early days, those early '90s of Nike design?
Well, I felt a little bit isolated or disconnected, I would say,
Mm, mm,
because that was a formative time for Nike apparel, Nike design from you know 90 through the mid
mhm.
90s, and when you arrived in 92, you know I would only see you or anybody else from that group when I came back home, maybe once a year
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Oregon. And so throughout my journey in Europe, basically, and okay, just for all you young pups watching this, no internet. We didn't
yeah,
have email at first, so it was faxing every night.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and the main thing that I was responsible for was representing the Nike brand while I was in Europe. And teaching these designers that we brought on and other product people that grew up in Europe what Nike is and what our brand stood for and what our identity is about and all that kind of stuff. And mind you, again, I was still pretty young and trying to figure it out myself. But
Mhm.
guess I had the American kind of aesthetic, and I knew what Nike was.
Yeah.
For at least I had 3 years on my belt before I got there. But yeah, so it was a lot of those kind of communications, and then yeah, I'd come back to the States once a year, and then some of the American designers would come over to Europe, of course.
Mhm.
But it was like you said, like a design camp that we would all go to and connect, and those were the kind of optimal times for us and especially for me to kind of reconnect in with the larger organization.
Sure. I mean, I remember design camps, just as you're saying, really as, in a lot of ways, like there's the day-to-day practice, but in a lot of ways, the place that we learned what Nike design is. Like, what do we stand for? Like, it was the chance for us to interact. And I think the team must have been much smaller when you started, but I think when I started in 92, it was I think there were about 300 of us that would go to the
Yeah,
design
that
camp.
sounds about right. Yeah.
So, yeah, for those listening, every year, basically anybody who was a designer at Nike would hop on a train or a bus or a plane or whatever and go to one destination, and have speakers and inspiration. Gordon Thompson, who was the head of design, would talk about like what the hell is Nike design, like how do we look at the world, and then we'd always have some kind of an insane project with just ridiculous prizes that I think you said last time you and I were talking, I think you said we renamed it Stress Camp after a while because it was all these competitive type A athletes and designers who wanted to win that all expense paid trip around the world, as the prize. So
Yeah, it was pretty intense, but the benefits of it were like you're talking about. You'd meet people from different walks of life and different disciplines in design. And for those that maybe don't understand it, or at least at the time, we had apparel designers, graphic designers, footwear designers. We had brand designers, some retail going on as well. So you had all these different types of designers and creatives that you'd get to connect with, and you'd be assigned a team, and it'd be made up of kind of a blend of those different disciplines. And so it was fantastic to just kind of get to know the larger Nike design organization and make those connections for sure.
yeah, and influence of so many others, and then just build your Nike network. Nike was all about relationships. I mean, that's going to be obvious in the more we talk is.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the relationships you've got, not just from having just left, but I know the folks that I'm still in connection with, like, are massive influences on my life. And I think the other thing too is we had a hell of a lot of fun. I think we got kicked out. I think there were 5 years. So there were 2 Orcas Island in the San Juan Islands. There was a San Diego trip. There was Skamania, which is kind of central-ish, or Washington a little bit, and then Salishan. I remember a scavenger hunt on the Oregon coast. And I think we got kicked out of like 4 out of those 5 resorts. We were asked to not come back. So it was.
We could pull in some of our colleagues and have a whole episode dedicated to the debauchery at design camp. Yeah, it was not our probably best look sometimes how we represented Nike in some of those public places, but we sure had fun.
It's part of the deal. I remember one trip to Skamania. Somebody it was one of the first Hummers that had come out, and people were taking turns driving this Hummer like everywhere that they probably shouldn't have. But yeah, it was.
I think the guy had maybe it was later on, like we had something called Design Day as well. But I remember some dude rented a Bigfoot costume and was running along the woods there while we were all having dinner out on this deck. And there was a golf course there, and he was kind of just doing the whole.
Yeah, it was perfect. It was perfect. And I think shortly thereafter it turned into like a 300-person food fight on that lawn, which is probably why we were asked to not come back. Yeah, no, good stuff. But that would have been, so if that was around 92, 93, Nike was, I think, around 3 billion at that point in time. We're now like at 50. Nike's now at 50 close or something like that. What kind of resources did you have when you went to Europe? Because for us, I know in the States when the team sports thing kicked in, there's tons of resources, but we'd never made uniforms. Like they're like, hey, you guys, hey, go work with these coaches, make these uniforms, and we're like, we don't need. It's not like retail where we're going to make a jersey and we're going to sell how many ever thousands of them. This is, we need 20 kits. We need 20 jerseys for the Michigan basketball team. Like, who does that with this kind of fabric and tackle tool? Like, we just had to figure stuff out. What did you have in place in Europe, which feels like it was the Wild West out that way, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think when I arrived, I was just trying to get the lay of the land, and like you said, we were just getting into the team business. Before that, we just, we knew how to do apparel, and it was more or less, a lot of it was not as high performance, I would say. I mean, you had running singlets and shorts and stuff, but yeah, we weren't doing, college football uniforms and things like that. So when I got over to Europe, from what I recall, we had definitely some manufacturers in the UK that had been doing, soccer jerseys for years and years for Admiral and Umbro and, all those footy brands over there. And so, they knew kind of just the basics of manufacturing football shirts, and they were basic acrylic kind of fabrications and just a basic cut. And I think probably for the first couple of years, we just definitely leveraged their expertise and know-how, and especially for the promo side, which was for the players. They knew what to do, and they could turn it quickly, and it was all about sublimation, and you'd have knit jacquards, and there's a huge knit industry in the UK that we could leverage, and that was kind of the staple of the business in global football, was this kind of knit jacquards, knit collars. The shorts even were kind of the slippery acrylic material as well. Or sorry, not acrylic, like polyester. But then I think as we got into the space and started kind of figuring things out, that's where Nike Design, kind of the power of what we brought to the table, kind of helped us take it into a whole different direction.
Yeah, that's wild, kind of, just even to think about. Is the parallel is very real with what happened in the U.S. But just coming in and accessing what exists in order to get an understanding, in order to then innovate and push forward. I mean, in the U.S., it was what I was talking about is, so I was first in the team sports thing, pushed on to basketball. And there was nobody in development who had like team kit, team uniform experience. And so I remember, again, this young kid, 27 years old at that point, probably, flying to Des Moines, Iowa to meet with this company called DeLong Manufacturing that made uniforms for high schools and colleges, and sitting down and showing them a Michigan design and saying, hey, can you make this? They put me up at, they had like, they had rather than stay at a hotel, because DeLong was kind of in the middle of nowhere, they had some farmhouse that they would put people up at that would come in to visit. And I was there, the room was in the attic. I swear that place was haunted. I swear to this day. But, just sitting with them, learning about tackle tool. They had 3 fabrics that you could use. They had what they called Dazzle, which was a shimmer sheen, a micro mesh, and a pro mesh. And that was like the extent of it. And then from there, I remember flying to St. Louis to meet with a company called Libby Enterprises, which was the company that makes tackle twill. And
I remember
going around with Bill Levy, who I think was the grandson of the founder, and he's pulling out, as a graphic designer, he's pulling out these flat file drawers that have all these tissues that have hand drawn. Like he had the original Cardinals baseball, St. Louis Cardinals baseball, and he's like, hey, my granddad would be having beers with the players the night before a game, and then he'd go home, hand cut the bat with the bird on the deal, and stitch them onto the jerseys and have them hanging in the lockers for the guys the next morning. And he's like I was just like, oh my goodness, like this is the history of sport. Like so cool. But so all the things that just to be exposed to and learn from, it was not part of what I expected when I signed up to do it. And, you said Mark Parker and Angela brought you into a room to talk to you about going to Europe. It was kind of the same thing for me. I heard Angela was walking down a hall talking about how sports marketing had signed all these basketball teams and needed uniforms. We don't have anybody that does uniforms. and my cubicle was off on an end because I was the last one hired in my group, so I wasn't in the in the mix of everybody else. I was kind of off in a corner, and I hear her walking around, talking about it, and I peeked up over the wall, was like, basketball teams, and I had done something in my portfolio around uniform design. Um, which we'll get into when we have my full story. But she was like, you've done uniforms. I'm like, kind of. So she's like, hey, get out there and talk to these coaches and let's go. And that was man, it was so entrepreneurial back then.
Yeah.
So much trust put in us to just say, hey, figure this shit out. Figure it out and make it great.
Yeah. We should probably mention who Angela is. Angela
Yeah.
Snow hired me, and she was basically our first design leader in apparel. She led the original art department at Nike, and hired me and sent me off to Europe. And then I think she hired you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
92.
amazing, talented person.
Yep, she and Todd Van Horn, and yeah, I think Angela just retired, like along with you, right?
Yep.
You guys retired as design legends.
Along with Wilson Smith,
Yeah.
amazing footwear designer. So
Yeah.
yeah, we
Yeah,
dear friends.
Angela is a true, not just Nike legend, true design legend, and what she's done for
Yeah.
so many people. Her design family tree is significant, which is amazing. A lot of people have a lot to thank her for, without a doubt. So let's see. You start, we talked kind of about getting out there, figuring out how to get it done. Now talk a little bit about what it was like, what you learned in terms of working with teams. Like, how'd you get to the place of knowing, "Hey, what the heck am I going to design for them? Like, where do we push? How do we like make something that they'd be like, hell yeah, bring it on."
Yeah, it's funny. I often get asked that, and we're figuring it out, and I think what it just came down to is, going back to kind of Nike's heritage and Bill Bowerman and Phil Knight working so closely with athletes to try and make things better for them. They're working with the Oregon track team and Steve Prefontaine, and you know, on to Michael Jordan. Obviously, that's the most iconic one, where, Tinker Hatfield and, the team would work so closely with Michael, and do product that was specific for him. And so those were examples that I kind of knew of, going over to Europe. So I think I just kind of translated that the best I could, as far as, we would meet with, like say go to Dortmund and meet with that club in Germany, and we would leverage the Nike people that worked closely with the team, and they worked with the equipment manager, and
Yep.
kind of would give us some guardrails, on, here's what worked, here's what didn't work, and those kind of things. At the same time, I think we were coming in as kind of the upstarts, and kind of had to earn credibility and show that, yeah, we understand football. We're an American company, but we're trying to do European soccer, and show that we understood it, and we could apply kind of our design sensibilities and take them
Yeah.
into place. So I think what we brought to it into the team space was a similar approach. Was do the research, understand the team, and the colors, their logos, their brand identity, their legacy in the sport, and then do a bunch of research and develop a concept, review that as a team internally at Nike, and then we'd go in there and present to them, here's what we think is right for you at this time. We would basically go in there as a united front and say, here's what we think is the best direction for you to take. And, we're speaking directly to the president or the general managers of these clubs, and we'd get the thumbs up, and then we'd get a little pushback, and we'd have to go back
Yeah.
to the drawing board a little bit. But that's
Yeah.
kind of how it started.
Yeah, I love the parallel, and just what you're saying about learning from Tinker and Tinker's engagement with athletes that came from Bowerman.
Yeah.
Again, you're in Europe. We don't know each other. Same thing in the U.S. with such a clear mandate, I think, as a culture that once we started doing some stuff with basketball programs. So again, I kind of entered through collegiate basketball in those early 93 to 96 window. And then they had folded Brand Jordan in. So I worked with Tinker on the 11 and 12. They folded in Nike basketball. So we had inline as well as team stuff. But the notion of being so true to the teams was something that was embedded in us. I think Kentucky had just come out because sublimation. You mentioned like in football, everything, much of it was sublimated, but in the U.S. and in sport, that was pretty brand new technology, which you could do an all over print on a fabric and then you sew it up, right? And Kentucky had just come out with they call it either the icicle or the cat scratch shorts, which were the spiky kind of all over, which just felt like, this is Kentucky basketball. Oh my goodness. Like it blew I was like, oh my gosh, this is blasphemous, right? And I always had that sensibility of like, we're not going to mess with the Michigan M. We just need to make it something. We just need to make sure it's presented in a way that is premium and beautiful. Duke with the D. And even the cuts and lines of the uniforms, we wanted to get much more into things that just felt like they had significance and were right for that program. And that coach is saying, hey, this is the kind of team I lead, so why wouldn't you want the uniform they wear to represent that? Yeah. And then the second, I just remember such a focus on details like trims, like tackle twill and rib trim, how it feels, how it fits, and recognizing that one, it's the function of how they play, but also each of those things is telling another little piece of the story. Every little thing has an element that either makes it more like what that team and that personality should be, yeah, or kind of takes it away from it. Yeah. Which, that wasn't, it's interesting, Drake, as I think about it, because it wasn't beaten into me, but it was just something that felt like you learned at Nike. You understood every piece tells a performance and a brand story. Like everything matters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you don't just, go the easy route either. I mean, you're curious as a designer, and you can't help but you go to Kentucky and you wander around, the campus there, and there's such rich history. It's like, what story not to tell? How do you filter it down to like, this concept is what we're standing for? Because, yeah, like with an Arsenal is like 60, 80, 90 years of history. Mm-hmm. And all we want to do is reveal something that felt true to the club and that the fans would go like, yeah, mm-hmm, you guys, you understand us, And yeah, so like you're saying, all those decisions and around little labels and tags and graphics and check cards, yeah, they were revealing something that is going to mean something to those true blue fans.
Yeah. What do you think? Can you describe at all what you think the aesthetic of football was before you came in, and then give it a year or 2 years after some of the things you started designing coming in? Like, what was the shift from it was like, and then, because clearly there was a shift, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think, late 80s, early 90s, it was, I talked about the UK manufacturer and kind of, mm-hmm, probably some of the limitations that they had, but also whenever you have some limitations, and then you can try to kind of, yeah, push those. But, the competition at the time was doing a lot more color blocking. Adidas had, stripes on the shoulders and stripes, sure, here and stripes there. And so,
all three stripes everywhere.
It was, yeah, a little more brand forward than they obviously had the colors right, but I didn't see just a lot of in-depth design work around kind of storytelling around, what makes, an Arsenal different from a Manchester United. They're both red shirts,
Right,
so,
right.
Obviously Arsenal had a white sleeves and Manchester had all red. But yeah, I think that was where we just had some insights to go, we're not going to just come and put a swoosh on this. Yeah. That's not doing our job. And to me as a graphic designer, I mean, you're not paying me to just come and size some logos and put a crest on this thing. I mean, that's not good enough. And what fun is that?
Right.
Yeah, I just had if anybody ever watched the movie Big with Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
he's this young kid. He goes into this toy company and he's like playing with these toys, but he's an adult now. But anyway, he's like, well, yeah, but what fun is that? So it's same kind of thing. Like, why would you just kind of do just like what everybody else is doing? No,
Right.
that's not the Nike way for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. The parallel on the U.S. front, at least college basketball, was I think things were like you said, cookie cutter. Felt either kind of cheap or they were pushing into the sublimation thing, which is, hey, we can print everywhere, so why wouldn't we? Without really having a point of view. And so you and I have talked about this before. The recognition of Duke, crisp, clean, classic, and that D matters, and then the shape of the D, like we changed. Simply all we did the first time, the first uniform with Duke, what we recognized was it was a silhouette that all these other teams were using, and we're like, Duke, that's yours. So all we did was we took the bottom, instead of it coming straight down in the short, we just finished it. We just put the short to the same point that was inside the D, right? So it's like a tiny little thing, but Duke classic. And then you go North Carolina, right? Beautiful with the Carolina blue, but then that Argyle on the side that Alexander Julian had thought about, which is pushing it just a little bit, but it's upscale, it's sophisticated, it has that collegiate kind of preppy deal, which is the next piece. And then there's Georgetown, which felt really cool to work on. Like we built the G because we thought Georgetown had no mark, and it was kind of like, why wouldn't you be like Duke, the Duke D, the Michigan NC, or the UNC NC, and the Michigan M? You need yours. So we made a G basketball, and then Coach Thompson was talking about. He was just very interested in the heritage and the story of kind of origin story of his journey. A lot of the kids he was bringing. So when he was like, "Hey, bring in that Kente print," was a cool piece. So you move from where Duke is classic and crisp and clean, Carolina is collegiate with a little bit of prep, to Georgetown with that Kente print. And man, I think one of the coolest pieces we did was a shooting shirt for Georgetown, which was that all over black and white Kente print with just a clean tackle to Hoyas on the front. Man, I wish I had. I'm so jealous of you. Every time I look at this camera, like the whole time I'm here, I'm jealous because I'm looking back there going, you've got all your shit. And the number of stuff
I got my shit together.
That disappear is not okay. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's, I guess what I love about telling these stories and hearing your journey, and Tom Andrich, I was watching doing Challenge Court with Andre Agassi and working on a tennis product with Sampras and what we were doing in the ACG space and footwear. I mean, it just all over the company at the time. We were living this kind of irreverence justified mantra. And so somewhere it was in the Kool-Aid. I think we just all kind of were bringing all these kind of fresh directions that were so true to the sport. We weren't just making up some for fashion's sake. We were revealing stuff that really represented these clubs and universities. So it was so fun to just kind of see what each other's doing and get inspired by that.
You know what's interesting about what you just said, which I had never thought of before, is if we talk about the design camp competition, and like we were a competitive bunch. Like we were literally a group that's like, you put a challenge in front of us, we're going to go get it. And yet you would think that would come with such ego. But just as you're talking about, like stuff that Tom Andrich was doing with Challenge Court and with that kind of stuff had direct, like if we saw something that was cool that he's doing, it's like, oh my gosh, like that when he and Devin put this swoosh only on Andre's cap for the first time, like at a US Open or Wimbledon, wherever that was, we were like, that's a thing. And I remember in team, we did chest to chest swoosh, the navy swoosh on a Carolina blue shirt with little North Carolina type on the back, right? And even in doing those things, it's like the world was eating it up, but at the same time, we were also doing stuff, and I don't know if it was this way in Europe. I imagine it had to be a little bit. We were starting to do things that governing bodies hadn't really thought about. Those who like to control stuff and say, hey, the rules are 6-inch number on the front, 8-inch number on the back. Yeah. And we're going, could we go 12-inch number on the, like, why can't we? So I think a lot of those things were upsetting. Your irreverence justified point is great. We were upsetting the establishment of sport, but in a way that was actually respectful and doing what was right for sport as opposed to just trying to be disruptive.
Well, and if you do it right, the strength of the argument is you have the university or the club that's fighting for you,
Yeah.
because they're questioning it as well, and I think we all probably saw it. It started with the band, Jordan 1, and Nike kind of saying, no, we're not going to,
Yeah.
roll over on this silly kind of regulation. And so, yeah, we're always going to push it. And, that's what pushes sport forward, not just relying on, well, sorry, we can't do that, that kind of thing. That wasn't how we were going to approach things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, there wasn't big egos. I mean, I think we all just inspired and we were respectful of each other. We saw what each other brought to the table, and we weren't what's the word? I'm forgetting my words, but it wasn't like it was a threat or anything like that.
Yeah. There was total openness, and like, hey, if I've got something that's working, it's like, absolutely, take it and go. It was, and Design Camp may have had something to do with that. Like, just the way we were connected was a really, I gotta say, it was a magical time. And for a kid who loves sport and wants to go, which I know is your background as well. Any other, just as a quick, as we kind of come around the bend on this, is there anything else that was like a project or a moment that kind of stands out about that window?
Yeah, we'll go deeper dive, because in maybe just to frame up kind of that conversation, by 94 we'd signed Arsenal, and then in 95 Nigeria had been signed, and so we did some work, quick turn jersey for them. And then we signed Italy. And who else? So we started in 1860 Munich. And then I do remember they sent a group of us to Atlanta to the Super Show for the Nike board meeting. And we were supposed to schlep our boards and basically show, hey, here's what's going on over in Europe, guys. Time to get on it, Nike, and obviously we weren't that flippant, but basically like, this is the world's biggest sport. So if we're a sport company, we need to be there. And so soon after that, we signed the U.S., Brazil, Holland, and just like
took off. Yeah.
So I think obviously that had an impact, but that was it was a memorable time. And by 96, I'd been away from home for 6 years, and it was time to drag me home, kicking and screaming. But time of my life for sure.
What an experience! Thanks for the time, Drake. I've loved it, and thanks everybody for tuning in. All right. So hopefully that session gives you a taste of the depth of stories and insights that are to come in the Designasty in future episodes with additional teammates. There are so many good stories, moments, and products that came from all of our time together, and we are going to get to each and every one of them. Drake will be back for another episode where we'll go deep on his career and the European football teams he made those iconic kits and jerseys for, so stay tuned. And check out our Substack page or Instagram for more tidbits and insights on the Designasty. While you're there, sign up on our Substack page if you want to receive updates on future episodes and additional stories, videos, or footage of Nike team sports that you won't necessarily hear here in this podcast. Thanks for listening.